Hi, everybody. I hope that this message, this moment finds you well over there. And if it does not find you well, if this finds you in a real place of struggle and having a hard time, that's also okay. I'm just so glad that you're here, that we're in this moment together on during this month that is so important. OCD Awareness Month, a time that is so important because I think it's bringing up hopefully more and more conversation about a way of thinking, a thought pattern, a way that a lot of our minds operate, that is a lot of obsessive compulsive tendencies. It's bringing these conversations hopefully more to light and letting more and more people out there know that they are not alone, that the thoughts and the things that are going on in their minds do not mean that they are a bad person. They don't mean that you're a bad person if intrusive thoughts are something that you really struggle with out there. I know firsthand the amount of struggle and the amount of shame and the amount of isolation that comes from obsessive thinking and those rabbit holes that we can find ourselves in our mind. And so honored to be here chatting with you today. And what I want to dive into and what I've decided to talk to you about today is a tool, a really beautiful tool that I've found really helpful during my journey with obsessive compulsive disorder and with intrusive thoughts and all of the struggle that can come along with that. I want to talk to you today about ACT, about acceptance and commitment therapy. And I want to, first of all, lay out there that I am not a therapist. I am not coming at it from that lens, and I'm not pretending to be a therapist and to have every little piece of ACT and how to treat OCD figured out and mastered. That's not at all what I'm doing here today. But what I am doing is coming at this from lived experience, and I want to talk to you about this tool that has been really helpful for me, and I think that it can really potentially be very helpful for you and another tool for your toolkit. You know, I talk so much in my life when I'm out there talking publicly about mental health and just having conversations with people and just how I approach my own mental health day to day. I talk about having a mental health toolkit because I am a pretty firm believer that there's no one fix-all solution when it comes to our mental health. There's not just the one magical thing that's going to take everything away and make life beautiful and rosy. That'd probably be really nice if we had that option, but I'm not so sure that that's the case, right? And I think the more things that we can have in our toolkit that all work together as a collective, and something that, you know, different tools that we can draw on each day, the more that we can have those tools in our toolkit, I think the better off we're going to be. And I think ACT is just another one of those tools that we can utilize. So I have done therapy with ERP and have done a lot of work in that area with a therapist. And what I found ACT to be was a really beautiful way to take a lot of the principles that I was learning through things like ERP and exposure and you know, exposing myself to the scariest things that were going on in my mind repeatedly and learning how to kind of allow that anxiety to be there and not overly engage with it. What I found ACT to be was a really cool way and a really beautiful way to bring some of those principles like with me into my day to day. And not necessarily having to always sit down and do exposures and you know, the kind of the more structured format of doing exposures. I found this to be actually kind of more of a way of thinking that I could apply a lot of the things that I had used and learned in that kind of more ERP world and kind of bring them into my day to day. Now, if you're wondering what ERP is, if that's a new term for you, that is exposure and response prevention. I hope I'm saying that right. But that is, I know I've always heard that as the gold standard of treating OCD and treating obsessive compulsive disorder. And I'm not here to refute that. I'm not here to argue, to talk, really get into anything ERP. I'm just saying that I have done that therapy. I have found it very, very helpful. And I have also kind of utilized ACT into my toolkit as well. And what I have actually here on my computer, I pulled up some notes that I had with my therapist that I'm currently working with my OCD therapist. And in our first session together, we actually, I took some notes, and she had me take some notes about what ACT is. And I want to share some of these with you. So ACT, Acceptance and Commitment Therapy, is essentially, what I wrote down here was a willingness to have a presence to your internal experience. And I think that's so profound, because how often are we all stepping out into the day having an emotion, having a sensation in our body, having a thought, right, that really pulls us in and brings up shame and feels really scary and gets us kind of caught in that obsessive loop that's so familiar to so many of us. ACT, I think, is lean as, and for me has been a way to kind of bring some willingness to experience whatever that is, whatever that anxiety is that arises, and not overly engage with it, right? It's, you know, in the example of having a thought, so having an intrusive thought that, you know, we'll just use the example, having a thought that maybe I want to do harm to somebody else. ACT has really helped me to notice when I have that thought, like, okay, there's that thought. That's a familiar thought. It feels scary. It feels very real. It's making me question who I am as a human. At the core, I must be a really bad person, and then the shame cycle takes over. That's a very familiar pattern for me. And ACT allows me to go, okay, there's that thought. I'm not going to try to push that thought away. I'm not going to try to make that thought totally disappear and all of the anxiety that comes with it disappear. But what I'm going to do is actually lean into it a little bit. And I'm going to say, all right, that thought gets to be here. Okay, I notice that thought is there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my best to put one foot in front of the other and kind of invite that anxiety along for the ride as I step into my day. So it's really moving away from this idea of anxiety is bad, the thought is bad, I need to get it to stop before I can move forward with my day. And it's saying, you know what, I'm going to move forward with my day even as that anxiety and as that thought is present. And so ACT, as I have come to understand it, is opening up to whatever your internal experience is in that moment, recognizing that it's there. And then it has kind of an action component to it. And that is saying, I can feel anxious, okay? I can feel overwhelmed, I can feel shame. But what I'm going to really work on, and what I actually have control over, is how I live my life. And I'm going to do my best to live my life. My actions are going to be in alignment with my values. And so I went through a process with my therapist of actually trying to kind of tap into, you know, like, what are my values? Like, what are the things that I find really, really important in my life and that I value and that I want to nurture in my life? And when the anxiety comes up, so when the intrusive thought arrives and arises, I'm gonna, despite how uncomfortable that might feel, and this is really hard, I'm gonna do my best to have my actions in that moment be more in alignment with my values. And so just kind of a tangible example of that might be maybe something that I know that I want to work on in my life and I would consider a value is connection, right? Connection can actually be a really scary thing for me because I'm sure a lot of you can maybe relate to this, that when I'm in a really tough place, the biggest thing that I usually need is connection, and yet it's the scariest thing for me, and it's like the last thing that I want to do. And so if I recognize that connection is something that I value in my life, and it's something that I find very important, thought arises, right? Intrusive thought. I might want to harm somebody else. I might want to do something really terrible, or maybe there's just something really inherently wrong with me. And those can play out in so many different ways, right? For me, it's a lot of times has like a sexual theme to it. There's something sexually wrong with me, or da 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 da, right? Where we all know kind of the places that our minds can go with that. So maybe the thought arises, I'm overwhelmed by it, I'm kind of scared of it, I'm afraid of what that is saying about who I am, I must be a really horrible person, shame wants to kind of flood in. What ACT has taught me and has allowed me to work on doing in my life is to say, okay, there's that thought. It's causing all these bodily sensations for me. It's making me want to retreat. It's making me want to kind of like isolate away from life. But I know that connection is a value for me, right? And what I've worked on doing is saying, I'm going to make space for everything that's coming up around that. And I'm going to do my best to have my actions align with connection. So I'm going to still go to coffee with my friend, right? That maybe was already on the schedule, and that every ounce of me wants to like take the safe route and like shut down that coffee date that I might have, because they might notice that I'm anxious and that'll make me really uncomfortable, and it might be really scary. But I'm going to do my best to put one foot in front of the other. I'm going to go down to my car, right? I'm going to put the key in the ignition while I'm feeling all the anxiety, while I'm feeling all the shame. I'm going to put my hands on that steering wheel. I'm going to do my best to drive, I'm going to drive myself to that coffee shop. I'm going to get out. I'm going to go sit down in front of my friend, and I'm going to allow all the anxiety that's come up from that intrusive thought to be there as I do my best to engage actively in a valued behavior that is connecting with my friend. So I think it's a really powerful thing, and I think it's a really, really beautiful tool that whenever these things arise, we move more in this direction of opening up to the anxiety and then engaging and taking action from a place of value and how we want to live our life. And I think one important thing to note, and I believe I actually wrote it down here, was that we don't have to love the anxiety, right? I think when people hear this idea of acceptance, it's not saying, gosh, I love feeling anxious and I love all the shame that's coming up around this. We can like absolutely flip and hate the feeling of it, right? But opening up to it and accepting it and embracing it just means I'm gonna hold space for it. I'm not gonna engage in that process of pushing it away and making it all go away. So I hope that gives you kind of an outline of I guess, my understanding of acceptance and commitment therapy. That's kind of just the tip of the iceberg, right? And a very brief way to explain to you my understanding of it in ways that it's been really, really helpful for me. And I do think that, I think where it can be really helpful is if you really identify with having a mindful practice. And like myself, I love yoga, right? And I'm really involved and I love that world. I teach yoga, and I've found that really, really helpful as a very helpful tool in my toolkit. I've found that ACT, a lot of the principles of it are very similar to just approaching life mindfully, right? And then making space for things, and not overly engaging with trying to resist whatever our experience is in that present moment. So that's where I found it really, really helpful, was that I feel like there were a lot of similarities between kind of the yoga mindfulness world and this idea of acceptance and commitment therapy. So I hope that helps. I also want to just take this time to really like just honor and recognize that I know how debilitating obsessive compulsive ways of thinking can be, right? I mean, my mind has tried to convince me of some really, really, really scary things, and has brought me down many a shame cycle, and has really made me question who I am at the core. And not to get too out there with you, but a big piece of my journey, along with all the other tools that I have in my toolkit, including acceptance and commitment therapy, has been this idea of self-compassion and really recognizing that what is going on in my mind is not who I am. It's recognizing that whatever thought is happening in my mind, that's not me. Like I'm right here, more in my heart. And that is such a more representation of who each and every one of us are. And I think a big piece of learning to live with OCD and understand this and come kind of manage it in a way that allows us to live our life more expansively and more full and more rich is really integrating also self-compassion and self-love, and really getting to this place of, I've really had to say to myself, whatever this intrusive thought is, again, for me, oftentimes around things like sexuality and very taboo subjects that stick in my mind and go over and over and over again, is to recognize that, like, whatever it is, right? Like whatever it is that in that moment I'm finding myself really fixated on and feeling really overwhelmed by, at the core, like I'm here, I'm not here. And that's a lifelong journey, right? Of recognizing that that I am I am that energy, I am that person that's in my heart, not the person that's up here thinking all of these things, because our mind is tricky, and our mind is really, really tough, and it breaks my heart, right, that so many of us out there are believing all of the things that are going on up here, and I just want to take this moment to make sure that we recognize and just honor the journey that you've been on, right? Like the journey up until this point that has brought you to this moment, watching this video, getting a deeper understanding of maybe your struggles with anxiety, obsessive thinking, OCD, all the things. That has required an immense amount of resiliency. We do not allow ourselves, I think, to really absorb that as much as we should. Because getting blasted and getting overwhelmed with intrusive thoughts and doubt and uncertainty and just the endless cycle that is, and the amount of exhaustion that can cause is so overwhelming, and it is a silent struggle, right? It is something that so many people in our life maybe don't even see, especially if you're kind of leaning in the direction of some more of the kind of mental compulsions, mental rituals, that sort of thing. You're stepping out into the world with an immense amount of things happening in your mind and internally, and feeling scared and feeling overwhelmed, and you're still choosing to put one foot in front of the other. And so I hope you can absorb that. I hope that you can hear that. I hope that you know that there are so many incredible people in this OCD community, in this mental health community, just in the world in general, who are there to support you, right? And I think it's finding those little pockets along the way of people that we can have, that we can trust, that we can be real with, that we can go to at the end of the day and say, today was a really, really tough day. And today was really, really hard. And I've found that just having one other person on the planet that knows that I'm having a hard time and that I'm struggling can help lighten the load just enough, right? Just enough to maneuver whatever it is that I'm experiencing. There are a couple of books that I know touch on things like acceptance and commitment therapy. I will be honest, I'm the king of buying a lot of books and then never reading them, or reading like 2 pages. I have not actually read either of these books, but I have heard good things about both of them. And so I'm just gonna offer them up to let you know that they're out there if they resonate for you. One is called The Happiness Trap. It says How to Stop Struggling and Start Living, a Guide to ACT, the mindfulness-based program for reducing stress, overcoming fear, and creating a rich and meaningful life. It's by Russ Harris. So there's an option for you. And then also, this is recommended to me actually by my therapist. She let me know that it was out there. The ACT workbook for OCD, mindfulness, acceptance, and exposure skills to living well with obsessive compulsive disorder. So to wrap up, you are not alone. let's all work on holding some self-compassion. Let's all work on not sitting around and waiting to feel 100% anxiety free or 100% doubt free before we step out there into the world and live our lives, because we're gonna let life pass by way too quickly if we get caught in that trap. And if there's ever anything I can do to help support you all, let me know. You can reach out to me. And I just want you to know that you are more resilient than you know, and that there are beautiful, amazing tools to live a very rich, meaningful, fulfilling life, even when we're stuck in our minds. So sending you all lots of love. Thanks for taking the time to hang out today, and I'll talk to you soon.